Okay. God bless you. God bless you. Hope all is going well. We are going to go live today and talk about ancient Kemet and the land of Punt in the Middle Kingdom. We're going to talk about this a little bit. I hope that you are doing well. I wanted to go live with this topic here. I hope that you are doing well. God bless you. Everything is going on okay with you, and we're gonna go ahead and go live here and get started and talk about this. Let's talk about ancient Kemet and the land of Punt. Let's talk about the Middle Kingdom and what's happening in Kemet and in the area that around the Nile Valley, with respect to Punt in the Middle Kingdom. So let's talk about Punt in the Middle Kingdom, and you'll see this gentleman here. This is a figure of perhaps Amenemhat II, who was a king in the 12th dynasty of ancient Kemet, or his son Senwosret II, one of the two, who was also a king in the 12th dynasty. And we're going to talk a little bit about Punt and ancient Kemet and kind of jump into that. But before I get started, I will ask you to support in some way. Sometimes I get that question, how you can support. I have several books available on Amazon and on my website, blackandeducation.org. 10 things your child should know about reading, writing, and math. It's a very important topic for us to be able to talk about, not only to know our history, but to help making sure our children know how to rebuild history, to know math, to know basics about reading, how to write paragraphs, how to write essays. Things of that nature are included on this from pre-K to fifth grade. Also stories about Black history. So you can get these at my website, blackandeducation.org, or on Amazon, either on Kindle or get a hard copy. You can check it out there. I asked you to take a look at it because it's important not just for us to be able to know our history, but for us to be able to rebuild it and to make sure our children have certain skills. So you check that out. I asked you to support me and help me out with that. I do appreciate it. And let's just get started. Let's talk about Punt in the Middle Kingdom, because this is such an interesting topic to me. And one of the reasons why I want to talk about it is that I want to make sure that we don't pigeonhole and put in a box all the things that happen in ancient Kemet and in Kush and in various places, because we talk about this in such a narrow way. As I've been reading and studying about this and reading documents and looking at all kinds of displays on it and all kinds of information on it, it becomes clear to me there's so much about ancient Kemet that we just don't even talk about. We just narrow it down. We narrow it down to certain places, and when it comes to certain times, we will talk about a time and maybe show some pottery and not show the people of that time, even though we have images of them, and we'll show stuff from later on. We just we mix it all up. And when it comes in particular to ancient Kemet and its relationship to people of the South, people farther in Africa, we like to frame that up. And people will say things like, it was just Nubians, and this is how they treated Nubians, and they'll show you some slipper or a sandal, from King Tut or from a pharaoh's foot or something like that, and say, this is what the relationship was. That's just not true, and it's not an understanding of the expansive interactions that went on between ancient Kemet and Kush and places like Punt and all of that. So I wanted to kind of get into that and talk about that. And I have this document here that I'll be talking about from to some extent. And if you are a subscriber if you subscribe to me on Facebook, you have this already. I've already uploaded it in our subscriber groups. You can take a look at that and read it. You can watch this video. We'll have a little more of an in-depth discussion, and you can download this and read it for yourself if you're a subscriber on Facebook. But I wanted to talk about that because there's so much that happened with ancient Kemet and with respect to Punt. And when we think about ancient Kemet and Nubia, it's more than just a little area, if you will. So I want to kind of put this up so we can kind of talk a little bit about this, because when you think about Nubia is really an area and a region. For a large part of history, when they mention Nubia, they're talking about a region. They're talking about a geographical region. Sometimes it's also referring to people, and there are actually people who I believe are still Nubian around today in that area. But a lot of times we're talking about a general area and a region, right? Not necessarily just a complete group of people the entire time that is talked about in ancient Kemetic history or when people refer to it. And when you think about that, what are we talking about when we say it? And I'll kind of make this a little bigger so you can get an idea and see this on the screen in the back here. So you can see that, when you go up to the northern part of Kemet, you're going into the delta, right? So the northern part of Kemet is called Lower Kemet because you're coming from the highlands of Ethiopia where the Nile is flooding in from Ethiopia and flowing from the south to the north, and coming from Kenya and Tanzania and Uganda. It's coming from that where it's meeting in Khartoum, and it's flowing from south to north. It meets down here. We see a little star in Khartoum, and it flows from south to north. And so what you have is you have Lower Kemet at top, in the north, and Upper Kemet Kemet is farther south, right? So once you get to that first cataract, that first major rocky area of the Nile, that's the southern border of ancient Kemet. That's their traditional southern border. When you get beyond that, then you start to talk about Nubia. So yes, today when you look at ancient Kemet, you look at modern day Egypt, Nubia was in what is today modern day Egypt. So a lot of people like to separate it and act as if it was like this far off place, or somehow they didn't interact. The two cultures didn't interact together. That was impossible, really, next to impossible. There were all kinds of relationships going on between the people who were what we call Nubians, what they call Nubians, and people what they call Kemet. You're talking about really a cultural difference there. But that's where you found the southern border of ancient Kemet. And when you say Nubia, a lot of times when you're talking about Nubia in the Nile Valley, you are talking about people who congregated around the Nile. So you're specifically a lot of times talking about people who, as the Sahara Desert began to dry out thousands of years ago, and people began to change their patterns, because people were all over this area, obviously for tens and tens of thousands of years. Like I've mentioned, human beings come from Africa, so it's not like people were not up and down the Nile for tens of thousands of years. They certainly were. You just have a period in time about 6, 7, 8, 9,000 years ago, as you start to see more and more drying out in the Sahara, you see some things change and people start to congregate around the Nile. And as we think about those people who are congregating right around the Nile, if you imagine this blue line being the Nile, of course, you're talking about people who begin to call Nile Valley civilizations or Nubians, right? So you're talking about people who are hugging close to the Nile, who are developing trade routes, who are having, religion, they're having economic, things are going, interaction that's going on, all types of things that people do that's happening all up and down the Nile. It's like no different than what we are today. People fight, they love, they fall in love, they get married, they trade things, they interact in all kinds of ways, just like we do today. They did it back in this day as well. So when you think about that, as you go farther south, if you will, you start to see Upper Nubia. And it's that area that you start to, right around Kerma, if you see the word Kerma right there around the third cataract, that's where you start to see the ancient kingdom of Kush around 2000 BC or thereabout. It is not that that's the first time that's there. So Kush could have actually been in existence much longer. There are much more documents that show and call this area Yam. They call it various names. And we obviously know that there are way more people in this area than the people who are started to be called Kush around 2000 BC. This area is inhabited for thousands of years, and there's trade going up and down this area for thousands of years. So this is taking place in Kerma around the third cataract and in what we call today the Sudan. So this area of Kush, of Lower Nubia, this is all, part of what we call Nubia and what was referred to as Nubia. And during this period of time, it's also important to note that when you're talking about Lower Nubia, it's not just like Nubians. It's like they're not like just called Nubians. You have the Wawat people, you have the Urjet people, you have the Sitri people. You have all different types of people that are referred to in a number of Kemetic documents as being who are living in Lower Nubia. You have people, as I mentioned, who are called Yam, people from Yam, who are living in what is Upper Nubia, what would become Kush. People are living and they have different names, they have different societies, different things that they brought together. And as we start to look at that, and we start to think about how this impacts us, there's not just that we're talking about. There's also the wonderful city of Kerma. As we talked about the kingdom of Kerma, and we were talking about Kush, Kerma is a city right around the third cataract and along the Nile that is flourishing for years, for many, many years. One of the most important things about Kerma and about ancient Kush, whether it's Yam or Kush, and that whole area, is that it was a trading area. It was a trading hub. When you think about the Nile and going up and down the Nile, you have a lot of traffic coming from the southern parts, from farther south in Africa, going up through the Nile to Delta, and not just up north, going out east. It's not just like people just stayed, in the east and they just stayed like right around the Nile. There were people who certainly did that for obvious reasons. The desert is there and it's a waterway, it's a major highway, but there are people going out to the east there. There are people going out to the west, or people north, south. This is Africa. These are people, right? So you have this important thing going on. And one of the most significant things you just have to remember and keep in mind so that people won't trick you and fool you is that Kerma, this Upper Nubia, the place that's called Kush, and before that, the place that's called Yam, right there around the third cataract, is a major trading partner and a major trading hub for thousands of years. That's one of the most important things you got to think about and understand, for thousands of years. And as you look at some of the ruins in Kerma right there behind me, you will note that people were trading all kinds of things. People were trading ivory. Elephants coming from farther south in Central Africa, elephant products. Ivory. They were trading all kinds of things like myrrh from ancient Punt. They were trading hard types of woods. They liked exotic monkeys. They liked giraffes. Like all these type of things. When you see some of these Kemetic and ancient Egyptian art, and you see panther skins, or you see something with ivory, or you see something that sometimes the stones, you think in your mind, they got that from somewhere. That's not all coming from ancient Kemet. This is not all coming from the land of Kemet. Many of these things are coming from farther south. They're coming from other places. And when you think about Punt and where Punt is, we know that Punt is farther south and it's to the east. So some people may believe it's in Eritrea. It's around the Horn of Africa. It's farther south. And one of the ways people got to Punt is they got to Punt by sometimes going across the Wadi Hamet, which was kind of a dried out now riverbed, sometimes traveling north of where Waset is, north of Thebes, going across this area. If you see this red strip here, being able to get there, get to the Red Sea, put together their ships, and then sail farther south down towards the Horn of Africa into what is it, Eritrea or that area. That's one of the ways they got there. And this document that I'm going to share is talking about that's how they did it. That's like exactly how they did it. And so, and you can hear and find things with Hatshepsut and her temple where they clearly talk about going south and traveling south, and they go south down this way and make their way out east, going toward the Red Sea to meet people of Punt. What are they getting from Punt? Why are they going to Punt? What are they getting from Punt when they go there? When they go to Punt, they're getting things like myrrh resin, which is apparently is very important to them. Getting things like things they would use to in worship. And so this is Amenemhat II, as I mentioned, or his son Senwosret II. And during his lifetime, they had a couple expeditions. During his lifetime and his father's lifetime, both of them, they had expeditions to Punt. And they went to Punt to get, one of the things that was very significant was being able to worship God in a way that was pure, in a way that offered things that were of the highest value. Like you just didn't, serve God with like your leftover stuff. The idea of giving the first of your fruits, literally the idea of giving your harvest, the first of your harvest, was something that was done in ancient Kemet by noble people, by regular people who were giving to the temple. They were giving of the first of their harvest. That's what they said. And they were giving of their best. And so Punt was considered to be God's land. It was called God's land. And so you would find people traveling to Punt throughout the expanse of Kemet's history, throughout the expanse of it, from the old kingdom under King Sahare and in the fifth dynasty, all the way through the new kingdom. You find people traveling to Punt to get things that are authentic in their mind from God's land in order to be able to serve God. So when you think about that, you start looking at this expanse and how they were traveling south. It's more than just the things people want to show you about Nubia. When you hear that, and you might even see people who will show up in these comments, right? You've probably seen a lot of the videos that I've done, a lot of the short videos or the reels what I've done, where I've kind of put a lot of information in a compact way, and try to talk about as much as the stuff that I can. And I ask that you share it. Let's get the word out. You hear people comment, oh, well, they didn't like Nubia, or they hated Nubia, or Nubia was this. They say very vile and sometimes racist things that they put in a comment, but people tell you that and they trick you not to give you the whole expanse of that relationship. And not to give you the whole expanse, and not to tell you that, and yeah, they also married Nubians, and yes, they also had many Nubians in their armies from the old kingdom even into the new kingdom. Even when you see some pictures of 18th dynasty soldiers in the new kingdom under Hatshepsut, under Thutmose III, under some very famous people, they're wearing Nubian wigs. They're wearing Nubian hairstyles. You have Nubian people in the army, and you have Kemetic people of Kemetic heritage wearing Nubian hairstyles. It is not just this relationship where they hate all Nubians and Nubians are under their feet. That's just not true. And that just does not show you the expanse of the relationship and the kind of interactions that took place as people interacted. People got married. People have children. People did all kinds of things. People went to war, and they definitely did fight, and people traded. There were times when ancient Kemet would go down into the area that is Nubia, Lower Nubia or Upper Nubia, and they would fight and they would set up forts. So right around this time when King Amenemhat II and his son and their successors were in power in ancient Kemet, they went down into Nubia. And they started to build forts. And you look right there around the second cataract, where it says Lower Nubia, right around what is today the modern border of Egypt and the Sudan. That's the second cataract. You can find, as particular during the 12th dynasty, you will find, in particular in their dynasty there, you will find forts that were being built. Beautiful forts, magnificent forts. No cheap penny ante forts. The fort at Buhin, the fort at Simna, the fort at Kumna, you have at least 9 or 10 forts. You have several forts built right around that second cataract as Kemet is extending its push into Lower Nubia. And they'll say right on there, they'll say, we're building this so that we can fight the wretched Kush. They say that, right? I want you to know they call everybody wretched. If you read some of their documents where they're going into Syria or they're going into places like Palestine, they're calling them wretched. They're saying these are the wretched people. People will try to show you them having Nubian people bound. Well, they had Asiatic people bound. They had Libyan people bound. They didn't say we hate the Nubians because we just hate Nubians. Anybody they went to war with, anybody they had a conflict with, they many times would call them wretched. They would have pictures of them bringing, tributes to them, and they would have pictures of them bound. This is what they said. And so people will sometimes just not really speak to that. So, but they were building these forts because Kerma and Kush were powers, that this was a power area. You don't build the kind of forts and you don't put the kind of manpower that they put into these forts in the Middle Kingdom unless there's a threat, unless there's somebody there who could fight, right? You also don't ask for Nubians to be in your own army because they were serving in the army in the Old Kingdom and in the Middle Kingdom and in the New Kingdom. You don't ask for Nubians to be in your army if they can't fight. There's a reason why Nubia, in particular Lower Nubia, was called the land of the bow. That's because they had expert archers. They were not just, fighting, they had expert archers. Being able to handle a bow and to be accurate in battle was obviously a significant thing and an advantage, 5,000 years ago. So you don't bring these people into your army in large numbers unless they can fight. You also don't do trade with them for thousands of years unless there's something valuable there. And you don't build the kind of forts to try to protect against them unless they are formidable foes, unless they are challenge you. So, but you have a lot of bombastic things that are going to be said in their documents, but when you actually look at it and study, you say, well, something's going on here. As you start to look at this and you start to think about what's happening in the area and how Kush and Kerma are developed. I mean, the people, one of the people who's done some of the most extensive studies with respect to ancient Kerma and in Sudan was a gentleman by the name of Charles Bonnet, and he wrote a book called The Black Nile, The Black Kingdom of Nile, and he did like 50 years, like over 50 years of research. Literally, he would come back every year to the Sudan. He's the guy who found that cache of the famous statues of the Kushite people. He would come back every year and do all this excavation, all of this stuff for 50 years. I think he's still alive. I'm not sure if he's dead or not. I'm not sure if he did it. If he passed away, it was recently. But he's been alive for a while. There's 50 years, 5 decades of research. People know it. The information is out. We know that Kush, we know that Kerma was a powerhouse. We know that they were a formidable foe. We don't have any guessing anymore. People just don't talk about it. And I want to tell you it. I want to tell you about it. Go read the book. Let's look at the stuff. We're going to talk about it here. I'll put as much of it out as I can to talk about ancient Kush, ancient Kerma, Kemet, Punt, that there is more going on here than what people just want to show you in a brief picture and show you the bottom of a sandal and say that sums up the relationship that Kemet had with all these people who were its neighbors. That's just not true. The evidence shows something different than that. So as we start to look at that, as I'm sharing this right here, and this was, as I mentioned, I've already sent this to my subscribers. If you're a subscriber on Facebook, I thank you. You can download this and read it. I wanted to kind of go over this a little bit briefly here. As I talk about, this is from the Middle Kingdom, and it's a gentleman by the name of Henu. And he was an officer under the 11th dynasty, one of Mentuhotep II's successors. He was an officer there. And he has an inscription that's in the Wadi Hamet. So right around this red area here that you see right here, that's an area kind of leading out to the Red Sea. And it's a rocky area. It's an area that had a riverbed in it at one time. And it's one of the roads that would go east in the desert. They did a lot of quarrying on that road to get a lot of stone, getting a lot of stone for various projects, because obviously they use a lot of different types of stone in ancient Kemet for a lot of different reasons. Well, he's talking about an excavation that he went on under the auspices and at the command of the king. So this is the 11th dynasty. This man's name is Henu. It's called the Hamet inscription of Henu. Anu, and he is in the 11th dynasty. And he's talking about my life, prosperity, health, and he's talking about the king, because they always said life and prosperity and health to the king. Sent me to dispatch a ship to Punt, to bring him fresh myrrh from the great ones over the red land, which is what they call the desert, by reason of fear of him in the highlands. So he's saying that the king, the ruler, sent him to go to Punt, and he went by the road, this Amenemhat road, and he went there and he built a ship once he got to the sea that sent them southward to go to Punt. And that one of the reasons he was going to Punt was that he can get this wonderful myrrh resin, because being able to burn incense back in the day, and even today, incense is nice to smell, very nice to smell, and a lot of people use it. Being able to burn incense was a significant thing religious for them, and being able to use it in their temples and in their service was important, and to get it from God's land. So he's saying that the king sent him to put together a ship, to send a ship out to the Red Sea, to send it down to Punt, to be able to bring back myrrh resin for him and various precious things. And he talks about fitting and outfitting the whole thing with various types of ibises and cattle and different things that he put on the ships, I guess, to send to Punt as a part of their offerings to them as they get through this exchange. And he talks about the army leading the way for them and clearing the way. So if you think about this road again, as we were talking about, this kind of road that's in the red there, and that going out in the eastern desert, that the army of Kemet had to kind of clear the way for him, because there will be people there in the desert that were hostile to them. Now think about this. We think about ancient Kemet, and we don't really think about challengers. We don't think about that there would have been people all around Kemet, all around the Nile, who may not have liked Kemet. Man, if you're the big kid on the block, a lot of people don't like you, right? And if you're traveling, and you got a large army, or you may have things with you, precious things, people might try to take it. And so it's not always that you had this loving relationship with people around you. People challenged them, right? They had people who maybe didn't like them, people who were maybe foes with them, all around this area. And a lot of the Nile Valley, keep in mind, was close to the Nile. So as you got away from the Nile, you had other people there, other countries, other societies, right? They all lived here. They lived here. They weren't all a part of Kemet. They were there, and we should give them credit and remember them and understand the dynamics around it. So he's saying in this document here that the army cleared the way before him, overthrowing those who were hostile toward the king. So people who might want to, jump them or raid them as they're moving out towards the sea, to be able to put their boat in the sea to go down to Punt. And so the army had to go ahead of him. He mentions that he went forth with 3,000 men right here, and he made the road a river. I like that. That's just a wonderful thing to say. He said he turned the road into a river of people, and that he had thousands of men with him, and they were going over the red land, over the desert, and that he was giving food to his people and treating the soldiers well as they went to make this expedition to go to Punt. And so he's describing that he did that, and he mentions later on in his description that he got back safely. He was able to come back safely and to come back and deliver to the king things that nobody else had been able to do before him, which is a lot of times what they say when they go on these expeditions, that they did something that nobody else was quite able to do, which was a remarkable thing. But if you can imagine, being there in ancient Kemet, and it's, around 2000 BC or thereabouts, and you are going across the Wadi Hamet, and you're coming at, and you're going down to the Red Sea and putting a boat in the Red Sea and going, that was a major trip. That wasn't a short trip. That wasn't a small undertaking. It was a major undertaking. And apparently they did this at least no less than 9 times, probably more than that you find documented, that we know of, that we can pull out and talk about in the Old Kingdom, in the Middle Kingdom, and in the New Kingdom. So when we start to talk about ancient Kemet, and we start to talk about their relationship with people to the south, it wasn't just this hateful relationship that we all like to talk about. They just weren't hating everybody all the time. And how could you live for 3,000 years hating everybody? I mean, if everybody joined against you, you'd have a difficult time surviving. How could you hate everybody? There were absolutely times where there were fightings. And when you go to war, a lot of times you document it, right? So you have a lot of documentation of when they went to war. You're going to have documentations of boundary stealers. You're going to have documentations of, hey, I kicked butt. We did these things. But you aren't going to see people talk about, we've been trading together for 500 years without a war. We've been trading gold, because there in Kerma and to the eastern part of where Kerma was, going into the eastern desert as to what is today Sudan, they were rich in gold. They were just rich in gold. Apparently they had electrum as well in Punt, because he talks about bringing back electrum in some of the things I was reading in Punt. And electrum is like a mixture of silver and gold together. It's like a mixture there, which was a precious thing that they used to put over top of their monuments or to put over top of obelisks and things like that. Apparently Hatshepsut, one of her famous obelisks that she put up in the temple of Karnak, was covered in electrum. So it's not there now. The electrum's not there now, but one of her obelisks is still standing. But just imagine that, having a 100-foot tall obelisk all covered in gold, silver, a gold silver alloy shining in the sun. Like that had to be beautiful. Well, you got, not only did you have gold in ancient Kemet in the eastern part of the desert, which is one of the reasons why they had to go there, and you had to go there also to get stones, but you had a lot of gold in the areas that Kush controlled in the eastern deserts, where there are other people there too. And you had to bring that, and they traded that gold. I mean, they were bringing gold from Kush, bringing gold from places south of where Kemet was. They were bringing gold there. And as they brought that gold, they were also getting other things from farther south in Africa. They were getting things like monkeys. They liked monkeys. They were getting things like ebony and certain hardwoods. There are certain types of stone that can't be found in the delta or in the northern part of Kemet, but it's found in the Sudan. Certain types of hard stones that they enjoyed, in particular kings of the old kingdom enjoyed making their statues out of, that's only found in farther south in Africa. So nobody talks about that. Like, nobody even mentions that was going on for hundreds, even thousands of years in Kemet and Kerma, with Kush, with Punt, with the Wawet, with people who were to the north, to the east, to the south, to the west. This was going on. And what made Kerma so significant, what made Kush so significant, it was at the center of that trade, where you had these products, these precious products coming from farther south in Africa, going north and going everywhere, right? Because apparently Punt, which was in the far eastern part of Africa, didn't only just trade with Kemet, or didn't only just trade with Kush. They traded with other people apparently across the Red Sea. They traded apparently with other people, not just with Kemet. They were trading because they had a lot of resources that people wanted to use. We just don't know a lot about it. So I kind of wanted to put that out there, because as we start to think about that, it becomes very significant to understand that Kerma and Kush were at the center of that trade that might have been coming from the east, in the desert, the eastern desert, where you had gold mines there, coming from the south, where you had all types of exotic animals and precious things like ivory and resin. And people wanted ivory, like unfortunately they do today in a certain ways. They kill elephants, but back in then they wanted ivory. They used ivory in a lot of things. And so you end up having a significant amount of trade coming through for thousands of years. Before Kemet is a country, before Kemet, the two lands are even joined, this area of Kerma, this area that I'm showing you now, this city, this site was a site of trading. It was already there, and it was already significant. And just nobody talks about it. So as we start to think about, we start to talk about ancient Kemet, we talk about Kerma, we should talk about the expanse of that relationship. We should dig deeper into what was actually happening. And we just simply have, one side of the story. And not only do we just have one side of the story, we have one side of the story that people tell us, and they pick and choose which part of that one side they're going to tell. And that's why it seems so wrong. That's why it seems sometimes even hurtful that people aren't giving the whole expanse of it. But we know now, we have information. There's plenty of information, and some of this information has been around for 100 years. It's sitting in museums, it's in documents, it's in write-ups that you can read. Some of it is in more recent things, like this information here that's been, for past 50 or 70 years, it's been out there. But it's been around for a while, and people know and understand that this was a significant area in and of itself, and there was more going on than just the things we like to pick out of documents or pick out of stela or stone monuments that don't tell the whole story of 3,000 years of people interacting together. So I pray that you look at it. I pray that you find more about it. If you have questions, please let me know. And I pray that you share this with somebody. God bless you. Talk to you soon.